Something extraordinary is about to take off, and it could change aviation forever. For over a century, airplanes have looked and flown almost the same. Wings, engines, and a tube full of passengers. But that era may be ending. Around the world, engineers are building radically new aircraft, designs that fly farther on less fuel, take off vertically without runways, and even glide almost silently through the sky. This isn't science fiction. Prototypes are already being tested. If just one succeeds, it could rewrite the rules of travel and spark the biggest revolution in aviation since the jet age. For most people, flying feels like magic. You step into a machine weighing hundreds of tons, and within minutes, you're soaring above the clouds. But behind that magic lies one of the biggest problems of our time. Modern aviation is reaching its limits. The first challenge is fuel. Airplanes burn staggering amounts of jet fuel, accounting for nearly 3% of global carbon emissions. That might sound small, but it's rising quickly, and governments are under pressure to cut it. Airlines are already facing stricter environmental rules, carbon taxes, and growing criticism from activists who call flying climate crime. The reality is clear. The industry cannot continue with business as usual. The second challenge is cost. Jet fuel is one of the largest expenses for airlines, sometimes eating up more than 30% of their operating budget. When oil prices rise, ticket prices rise with them. That leaves airlines stuck in a cycle of thin profits and frustrated passengers who pay more while service quality declines. The third problem is technology itself. If you look at a Boeing 737 or an Airbus A320 today, you'll notice something. They look almost identical to planes from the 1960s. Yes, the engines are more efficient and the wings are optimized, but fundamentally, the design has barely changed in 70 years. This tube and wing configuration has been stretched and upgraded to its absolute limit. There are only so many ways to squeeze out more efficiency from the same old shape. Add to this the rising demand for air travel. The world's population is growing, and more people want to fly than ever before. In Asia, Africa, and Latin America, middle classes are expanding, and millions are taking their first flights. By 2050, the number of air passengers could nearly double. If aviation doesn't transform, the sky could become more crowded, more polluted, and more expensive than we can manage. So here's the dilemma. The world loves flying, but the way we fly today is unsustainable. The industry must either evolve or face a crisis. And that's where the radical new ideas come in. Concepts that once seemed impossible, but now might be the only way forward.
If traditional aviation has hit a wall, then the only way forward is to break the mold. And that's exactly what engineers around the world are trying to do. They're experimenting with designs so radical, they look more like science fiction than airplanes. But make no mistake, these machines are real, and they could take to the skies much sooner than most people expect. One of the most promising ideas is the blended wing body BWB. Instead of a tube with wings bolted on, the BWB merges the fuselage and the wings into a single sweeping shape. The result is a flying wing that offers enormous improvements in aerodynamics. Early tests suggest a blended wing could cut fuel consumption by up to 20% compared to today's most efficient airliners. That's not a small step, that's a giant leap. NASA and companies like JetZero are already developing prototypes, and they could be in service within the next 2 decades. Then, there are electric and hybrid electric aircraft. Small companies like Aviation, Heart Aerospace, and Magnix are building battery-powered planes that could revolutionize regional flights. Imagine flying 300 miles with zero emissions, almost silently, and at a fraction of today's cost. While batteries are still heavy and limit range, hybrid models, mixing electric motors with traditional fuel, could bridge the gap and make short-haul flights cleaner and cheaper. Another area turning heads is eVTOL aircraft, electric vertical takeoff and landing machines. Think of them as flying taxis, small, quiet, and capable of lifting off from city rooftops. Companies like Joby Aviation and Lilium in Europe have already flown prototypes. If certified, they could change the way we think about commuting, not just airports, but urban skies buzzing with silent electric flight. And let's not forget supersonic and hypersonic concepts. While Concorde was retired 2 decades ago, firms like Boom Supersonic are betting that new materials and engines can bring back faster-than-sound travel in a greener way. Meanwhile, experimental hypersonic craft aim to slash intercontinental travel to just a few hours. All of these designs share one goal: to break aviation out of its decades-long stagnation. They promise planes that are lighter, quieter, more efficient, and in some cases, radically faster. It's a vision of the future that looks nothing like today's airliners. And that's exactly why it feels so exciting. When it comes to the future of aviation, the race is already underway, and the competitors couldn't be more different. On one side, you have giants like NASA, Airbus, and Boeing, armed with decades of experience and billions in resources. On the other, a wave of bold startups is pushing radical ideas that big companies are often too cautious to try. Together, they form one of the most fascinating battles in modern technology. Let's start with NASA. While the agency is famous for space exploration, it's also quietly reshaping aviation. Its X-59 quiet supersonic aircraft is designed to fly faster than sound without producing the deafening sonic boom that doomed Concorde. If NASA succeeds, it could open the door to supersonic travel over land, something that's been banned for half a century. Imagine flying from New York to Los Angeles in just 2 hours, as quietly as a normal jet. Next comes Airbus, Europe's aerospace titan. Airbus has unveiled its Zero project, a series of hydrogen-powered aircraft concepts that could enter service by 2035. These designs range from futuristic turboprops to blended wing bodies, all powered by hydrogen fuel cells or combustion. If Airbus pulls it off, it would mark the first true zero-emissions commercial aircraft, setting a new benchmark for the industry. Boeing, while more cautious, is also studying blended wing bodies. Through its experimental X-48 program with NASA, Boeing has tested scaled-down prototypes for years. But critics argue Boeing's current struggles, from the 737 MAX crisis to supply chain delays, have slowed its ability to take big risks. The question is, can Boeing still lead innovation, or will it fall behind to more agile competitors? Now to the startups. Companies like Joby Aviation, Lilium, and Archer are leading the eVTOL revolution. They've already built and flown full-scale prototypes, attracting billions in venture capital. These firms aren't aiming to replace airliners, at least not yet. Instead, they want to transform short-haul urban transport, turning traffic-clogged cities into hubs of silent, electric aerial mobility. And then there's Boom Supersonic, betting on a comeback of fast travel with its Overture jet. Backed by big investors and even some airline pre-orders, Boom claims it can deliver supersonic flights that are both affordable and sustainable. Each of these players has a different vision, but they're all chasing the same prize: to define the future of flight. The question isn't whether aviation will change, it's who will change it first.
When we talk about futuristic planes, it's easy to imagine engineers and test pilots driving innovation. But in reality, the future of aviation will be decided just as much in boardrooms and parliaments as in wind tunnels. Technology may be the engine, but money and politics are the fuel. The first obstacle is cost. Developing a brand new aircraft design isn't like building a new smartphone. It requires billions of dollars, years of research, and endless testing before a single passenger can step on board. For example, Boeing's troubled 787 Dreamliner program cost more than $30 billion to develop, and that was for a fairly conventional airliner. A blended wing body or a hydrogen-powered aircraft could demand even more. Investors and governments will have to decide, is the gamble worth it? The second factor is risk. Airlines are notoriously conservative when it comes to adopting new technology. Their business depends on reliability, efficiency, and safety. Buying into a radical design means betting their future on something unproven. If a new aircraft fails certification, suffers delays, or proves too expensive to operate, airlines could lose billions. That's why many carriers prefer to stick with incremental upgrades rather than leap into the unknown. Then there's politics. Governments play a huge role in aviation. They set emissions targets, regulate safety standards, and often subsidize new technology. In Europe, the EU is pushing hard for hydrogen and electric aviation, offering billions in green funding. In the US, NASA's partnerships with startups are helping to test supersonic and electric designs. China, meanwhile, is investing heavily in its own aviation sector, hoping to challenge Boeing and Airbus dominance with not just traditional jets, but also futuristic concepts. And let's not forget the lobbying power of oil and traditional aerospace industries. Cleaner, disruptive technologies threaten entire supply chains, from jet fuel producers to parts suppliers who have built their businesses on conventional engines. These players won't give up easily, and political influence could slow down the pace of change. Finally, there's the public perception. Passengers have to feel safe. It took decades for travelers to trust jetliners over propeller aircraft, and supersonic travel, while glamorous, faced criticism for noise and environmental damage. Convincing people to board a hydrogen-powered jet or a battery-driven aircraft will require not just engineering breakthroughs, but also careful marketing and government reassurance. In short, the technology is coming, but whether it takes off depends on who's willing to pay, who's willing to regulate, and who's willing to take the political risk of betting on the skies of tomorrow.
So, what happens if even one of these radical designs succeeds? Aviation could enter a new golden age, one that feels as dramatic as the moment the jet engine replaced propellers. If blended wing bodies or hydrogen-powered planes prove viable, airlines could slash their fuel costs and emissions. That means cheaper tickets, greener skies, and more flights connecting parts of the world that today feel unreachable. Supersonic travel could shrink the planet, turning a 10-hour journey into just 4. eVTOL air taxis could transform how we think about commuting, lifting millions above gridlocked streets. But the biggest shift may be psychological. For decades, aviation has felt stuck, with planes looking almost identical year after year. A bold new design would remind the world that flight can still inspire, that it's not just about getting from point A to point B, but about reimagining what's possible. We stand on the edge of that future right now. Something very different is about to take off. And if it succeeds, it won't just change aviation. It will change the way humanity moves, connects, and dreams.